So today I'm chatting with Rick Biel, and he is a financial expert, and he's giving us some assistance with some of the common questions that we have out there in the area of finance and personal wealth building and things like that. How you doing, Rick? Nice
I'm
to see
doing
you
well,
again.
Martin. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Hey, great. So give the audience a little background on like your connections to skilled trades and maybe some clients that you've helped out, just a little bit of background on you.
Okay, a little bit of background. I'm maybe a little different than some financial advisors. I actually originally went into education. I was a teacher. I was an economics teacher at the high school level, and that kind of led me into my interest in the economy and finance, and ultimately dovetailed into that. Dovetailed into that industry. So that's just going back to the beginning. But kind of interesting with me, I grew up with a single mother who was disabled, and kind of grew up in poverty, I guess you would say. And so I had an interest in money, but I never had any money. So I had to learn a little bit about how money works, and I made all the mistakes that people make and went into debt and so forth. And when I went to college, I played baseball in college, but I went to a non-scholarship school. So I went to school full-time, worked full-time, and then also played baseball as well. And in the meantime, working was all kinds of jobs. I did a lot of construction work, spent some time I went to college in Texas, spent some time on the Texas-Mexico border, shoveling asphalt on a paving crew, and did some roofing. So I know what it's like to work. I do have a college degree, but that doesn't really mean I'm smart. I understand working for sure. And then, as I got into the industry, a lot of the clients I have are not your ultra high net wealthy individuals, people that are kind of just getting started. And a lot of these people are in the trades. And I love to work with people like that because that's kind of me in a nutshell. That's how my life started. Wasn't given money, had to work for everything I got, and just started on a very small scale and started to invest gradually and ultimately build up some assets over time. But I manage a retirement account for a construction business. I have some other construction business clients that I work with, and so, like I said, I'm fairly familiar with people that do work in that industry, and a lot of people in that industry, it takes some time to get started. You know, they like me didn't come up with money and don't feel they have any money available, and so it's really been enjoyable for me to get people started, regardless of how much money they have, and help them build their assets as they move forward. So anyway, that's in a roundabout nutshell where I'm coming from.
That's great. I'm sure a lot of our audience can relate to that. So one of the things, Rick, that I hear over and over, I hear this from employers as well as people working in the field, is that wages actually are going up quite a bit in a lot of the skilled trades, right? So they're making more money now, primarily because it's a supply and demand, just like anything else in the labor force. And so I hear quite regularly employers saying, "Look, I've got these 20-somethings that they're really good, they're really talented, and some of them are making into the six figures just after being on the job 5-6 years, right? And they're always broke. And one of the frustrations is the employers, they're like, how could these people, how can they have money challenges when they're making so much money? What do you think about that? I mean, how does that happen in your world?
Well, again, I guess a little bit with an education background. I taught economics. I would assume you're familiar with Dave Ramsey.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. I'm one of his endorsed advisors in the area, and I've taught his financial education courses at the high school level. So I say all that to say that a lot of it's a lack of education. I mean, our culture, we're being bombarded with marketing constantly. You need to buy this, you need to buy that. And they're not really taught a whole lot about money, about debt, and taking the proper steps to manage your money. And I'm amazed, even it's not just 20-year-olds, Martin. I actually had a client meeting this morning and met with a guy who's 62, and he's talking about retiring. And he just bought a $60,000 truck because he felt like he needed it. And I said, man, you're getting close to retirement here. You need to scale it back and pay off your debt and so forth. But again, long answer to the question, but education. People need to be taught properly, and they don't get it in school. A lot of times they don't get it from their parents. I didn't get it. Like I said, I grew up with a disabled mother, and I knew nothing about money. I made every mistake you can possibly make. And then I finally came to the conclusion that I'm not brilliant, but I have a couple brain cells, and I used them, and I started to read and learn. And as I educated myself, I kind of got myself out of that pit. A book, I want to mention this, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, and this will be valuable for your listeners, but The Millionaire Next Door, that's the consummate study of millionaires in this country. And when I read that book, it changed my life financially, absolutely changed my life. And I love it because those people that are in the trades, they may not look wealthy, but if you take the right steps and have the right habits, you can become incredibly wealthy in this country working in those industries. You don't have to have a suit and a tie and be a doctor or a lawyer. In fact, as that book points out, some of the doctors and lawyers with massive student loan debt have to come across like they are wealthy and they buy the nicer houses and cars. But some of the people that went right into the trades and maybe didn't even get a college education and don't try to impress people, those are the ones that started early on, didn't accumulate debt, and then from there can really explode. In the years I've been a financial advisor, it's stunning to me, some of the people that have walked into my office, some look like they're walking right in off the street, like they're homeless almost. And I look at their net worth and it's just amazing. And then conversely, you see somebody who's, and this is not always universally true, but somebody that's, dressed real nice and talks really nice and they have massive debt. So anyway, rambling here, but it all goes back to education being taught properly.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things we're trying to do at Skilled Trade Rescue is I'm on a big mission right now to help people in the skilled trades get the skill sets to launch not only their technical career, that's one aspect of it, but if their money world, most of marital problems, most big challenges can be connected to money. It's unfortunate, but that's just how it is, right? And that if you're having money troubles doesn't make a difference how much you make. If you're struggling each month or each week to just survive, and it infiltrates the rest of your life, right? You're worried, so you're not doing a quality work at work. And this is some of the employers are telling me, I've got these superstars that are just amazing. They're a gift to whatever the heck they're doing, but they're so distracted with all their personal problems, and a lot of it is tied to money. So Rick, let me create sort of a scenario here. Let's say you have a HVAC trade that's near to my heart. You have an HVAC couple come into you. The husband's been in the trade for a while. They're making six figures or so. They're struggling over the money. And they finally have come to the place that they need a professional to help them sort this all out. So what's the journey that you lead them through to get them to the other side, if you will?
Well, that's a fair question. It's a pretty broad question. I always like to ask what their debt situation looks like, because if you are saddled with debt, it's kind of hard to free up the money you need to save and invest. So we want to look at that. If in fact, the debt situation is not overwhelming, then we would talk about what you're doing for retirement. A lot of these people, if they're self-employed, they may not have a retirement plan. If they're working for a company, they might have a 401k. So you want to ask what they're doing there, if they're getting a match. And if not, then I like to talk about a Roth IRA to get something started if they qualify with their income. If you make too much, you can't fund the Roths. But you got to get started. So I have a chart that I always show everybody. It's just the stock market since 1934. And it'll just show that the market has averaged about 12% every year since 1934. And inflation right now still running, roughly 3%. Wow. You got to do something to keep your money ahead of inflation, and you've got to get started. So we would just talk about retirement planning, what they're doing currently, what they can potentially do, what their debt situation is. And then if they're in good shape on the retirement planning, then we can certainly talk about investing outside of a retirement account, just investing in a joint brokerage account, just as a wealth building account. I like to set that up for people if they can do that. But as a fiduciary, I have to have a good understanding of where they're at. So if they've got $500,000 in debt and they're talking about investing, if I put them in a risky investment, I have a hard time selling that to my compliance, and I can get into trouble. So, right. And of course, you can't be in this business unless you're trying to do what's in the best interest of the client. So getting a just good overall picture, and then just going kind of step by step through the process of getting started. I met with a guy not too long ago who was 60 years old, actually, and got him into a Roth IRA. And I told him, I said, well, the best time to have started this was when you were 18. The next best time is today. And my point in saying that is, we do the best we can with where we're at and make
Mhm.
take appropriate steps from that point on.
So you mentioned something I want to delve into because I've had this question come up before. So you've got people out there that are not licensed brokerage type people, which is what in other words, you can guide people on on investment strategies and all that kind of stuff. And then there's you have to do all the licensing and all the education. It's a big endeavor to do that. And then you have financial coaching people that are like Ramsey, Dave Ramsey. That's sort of his claim to fame of getting people, the baby steps and all that kind of stuff. I want to delve into the fiduciary. I've had questions come up about that. What's the role of a fiduciary in your world? What does that mean actually?
Yeah, that actually is kind of a weird term, and
Okay.
it is interesting to navigate. Many advisors would say that a true fiduciary will only set up accounts that are on a fee-based level, where they're going to charge you a fee, be it 1% a year, 1.2 or whatever, as opposed to charging a commission. Now, frankly, I do both. I do commission or fees. In some cases, setting somebody up in a commission-based account can be more cost-effective long-term. So I say that to say a fiduciary really is what is best for them. If I do a side-by-side comparison, let's say we're setting up a Roth and we charge a commission and at whatever percent, 4%, and a fee at 1%, and I can show them over 20 years that you would pay twice as much in the fee-based account than you would in the commission-based account, then am I not doing what's in the best interest of the client if I point that out? So when all is said and done, fiduciary is, are you doing what is best for the client? Now, when I set up an account, I have to go through a whole bunch of paperwork and submit it to my firm and do what's called a fiduciary review. And I have to explain why what I've recommended is what I think is best for them. And then the compliance has to buy into that and sign off on it. So, fiduciary, just doing what's best for the client. But a lot of advisors and firms will really confuse that term.
Yeah. Right.
So sometimes I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, if commission is truly best for the person, I'm not an uneducated advisor. It can be actually better for them. It just depends on the individual.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's actually the best way I've heard it explained because it is confusing. It seems like they use that term gets thrown around pretty willy-nilly. That was a good one. Do you help your clients with budgets? This is a big deal to me. I've been an advocate of, I have what I call the power moves is what I call them. The first step that we recommend is first getting real about your situation, get it all out there, how much money you're making, how much money you're spending. And that usually starts the first aha. And then we get down to the most boring thing in the world. Nobody wants to do it, is a budget. Do you help your clients with budgeting? Is that a type of service that folks like you do, or is that sort of downstream a bit from where you guys are at, or upstream? I don't know.
Yeah, good question. I can assist people with a budget. I do emphasize how important it is. I agree with you, Martin. I mean, a budget is huge. You have to give every dollar a name, every dollar that comes in. You have to tell it where to go. To be honest, I don't necessarily sit down and go line item by line item and create a budget for them, although I have done that before. So I do approach budgeting in a more global perspective. Now, I'm not in any way trying to promote Dave Ramsey, but I will say, what he does, I like in that, you have SmartVestor Pros, which I have been in the past, where that's somebody who helps them with their investing. I pick investments, put them in IRAs, and then he has what are called financial coaches, kind of alluded to, and those are people that get into the nitty gritty and they will help somebody with a budget line by line. But to get really deep in the weeds on the budgeting, that's normally not something that I do.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Another question I get is like when you're planning for retirement. I know this has a ton of variables. But I get this question from time to time. So let's say you've got somebody that's, a couple that started working in their 20s and, they've got some kind of a semblance of a budget. They're investing with somebody like you. They're doing their stuff, right? How much money does it take in today's dollars to retire and live comfortably? And I know that's a big subject because it depends on your spending habits and a lot of variables. But is there a range, for a couple, no kids living at home? Is it $1 million? Is it $2 million? What does it take to live with middle class standards in 2025? What do you think? Just your opinion on that.
Yeah, well, it would just be my opinion, and you're correct. There is a huge range there. A lot of it does depend, of course. Again, going back to your debt level, do you have
Right.
your house paid for? Do you have any consumer debt? Are you entering retirement again without any outside obligations? Can your money truly work for you? I would say, and this is just my opinion, if all debt is taken care of, I think you got to be looking at roughly $1 million,
Mm-hmm.
and even that can be borderline. But I
Right.
think $1 million, and again, if you look at the 4% rule, you can just do the math.
Mm-hmm.
If you have $1 million saved and you're pulling out 4,000 a year, and you can live on 40 or 4%
4,000 a month.
40,000 a year, can you live on that? Then that would kind of be your answer. If that's not going to work for you, then it should be more than that. But
Mm-hmm.
again, understanding this is not gospel, it's just been kind
Right.
of my experience. I think you want to kind of shoot for that range, and I
Mm-hmm.
know that can be a discouraging number, but if you get started early on, people will be amazed. It's not
Oh,
that difficult to achieve that number.
yeah. Especially with the magic of compounding and all that other stuff. Yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah, I guess I'm trying to figure out in my little very small way, I'm trying to figure out how to help folks in skilled trades, because one of the challenges that skilled trades has that a lot of industries don't is that the income stream can be so variable. It doesn't matter if you're working as an employee or if you're an employer. Man, it's definitely feast or famine. You've got the economy, that's the big one, right? And that cycles every 7-8 years or whatever. And then you have the norm. You have weather patterns like being an HVAC in the spring and the fall. The weather's pretty mellow, so you don't have a lot of service calls and things like that. And then so that adds an extra wrinkle into it. And what I've been talking to as much as I can is about the need for some type of an emergency fund, where you have cash liquid that is stored up. And for some reason, I don't know why this happens, but if you have an emergency fund, like Dave Ramsey says, he says that Murphy, if you don't have an emergency fund, he's living in your spare bedroom.
Yeah.
But when you do, you kick him out.
Yeah, no, that's true. The emergency fund is huge. Most financial planning people will say 3 to 6 months of expenses set
Yep.
aside. Susie Orman, who I'm not a disciple of hers necessarily, but she says you should have a year of cash set aside. So I think you can find whatever happy medium there that works for you. I personally have a fairly sizable emergency fund set aside because I've lived long enough. I know that life can happen, and things can go wrong. Now, to
Right.
go back to your question, and I thought about this because while this may relate to some of the people that you've worked with and are listening, back years ago when I was a teacher, I started teaching in a private school and didn't pay me very much at all. I was only paid over 9 months of the year. And so June, July, and August, I had no income.
Mm.
Now, it didn't take a whole lot of brain power, and I figured out what I had to do is I had to budget. So every time I was paid in the months, September through whatever, I would pull out the money I would need for those months. So I set that into a separate account that was not to be touched. So when I hit June, I had the same monthly income sitting there that I had in December or in November or October. It was sitting there. And then July and August, that money had already been set aside. And I found that was the only way I could function. And I think that now that was more planned and scheduled because I knew it was 3 months. If you're an HVAC or something like that and you're out for 2 months here and 3 months there or whatever, then that's a little bit different. But it all goes back to you just have to have a cash reserve. And it's all planning. You just have got to be prepared because, like I said, I don't need to tell you this or anyone else. Life happens. I wish life went perfectly. There were no accidents. There were no problems. There were no issues, but that's not the case. I live in an older house, and not too long ago, the sewer line leading from my house out to my alley burst because it was made out of clay. Back in house was built in 1948, and so the roots went through. Anyway, insurance wouldn't cover that because it was from the house out. So that was 17 grand out of my pocket I had to come up with. Now that stung, but I had it.
Right.
It didn't set me back.
You're still eating.
I was still able to eat. I was able to survive and pay the bills because I was anticipating potential problems like that.
Right.
And so that's just what you have to do. It's not rocket science. You just got to be prepared. Don't spend every dime that you make. And I'm not talking about this is not investment money either. You wouldn't want to be pulling money from your IRA or or a mutual fund or a stock you purchase, you need to have cash on hand, which is not, it's just meant to handle the emergencies, not to make you money.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been talking about a bit with the emergency fund, a friend of mine, Nick True, he's real popular. He's a coach. He's a financial coach guy. And he says having an emergency fund is great. I mean, you have to have that. He's very big into that too. But the dollars that are in there, you need to, like any budget, you need to assign to something. Because what ends up happening is if somebody has an emergency fund built up, and if you don't have emergencies, air quote, clearly defined, it's amazing what can become an emergency.
That's true.
He told me he had a client that, what was it? He was talking to somebody and he asked them that question. So what's an emergency? And the husband and wife looked at each other, and the wife starts looking at the husband, and he puts his head down, and it was like, yeah, I didn't need that wakeboard. And
that's easy to do. That's easy to do, just to set it aside, and then what you think is an emergency, you spend the money on.
Yeah.
Another example, one thing that I have done based on mistakes I made in the past is I used to make car payments, and because nobody ever told me, I had to learn this on my own. So now what I do, every time I get paid, I make a car payment, but I make a car payment to myself, and it's in a designated account. So when my next car dies, I'll just simply be able to pull that money out that I've designated for the car and not make payments. So in some cases, you can be very intentional. In other cases, you don't know what's going to happen.
Right. No, that's a great point. Have you ever heard of an application called YNAB? It stands for You Need a Budget. It's a software program for budgeting. Have you ever heard of that?
I don't think I've heard of that. No.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've been working with YNAB for a while, and it's been a really helpful tool for people to get, to get that budgeting component. Because have you ever heard of the bucket approach when it comes to budgeting and investing? Bucket approach?
Sure. Now, with regards to investing, having a 3-bucket approach, that was what you're referring to?
Yeah. I think we're probably thinking the same thing. So one of the things that I've personally followed that's worked really great for me. So once you get your budget in order, then that all gets dialed in, and hopefully you have some money left, income, less expenses. You've got something there to work with. And most people do, they just don't know it. Anyway, so you have your emergency fund bucket, and you work with an advisor or somebody to help you try and figure out what that is. And if you're doing your budgeting correctly, you know what that is because it's telling you how much it costs you to live. Anyway, so once you fill up that bucket, you have 6 months, year, whatever spills over goes into your investment portfolio. What say you about that concept?
Well, yeah, that's a good concept. You have your liquid money that you would need or can live on. Mm-hmm. Then you would have a moderately aggressive bucket, which could be mid-range type and more conservative investments for the most part. And then a third bucket, which would be more aggressive total stock market investments. Now, going back to a reason that I maintain a very large emergency fund, and I tell this to my clients, is when the market goes down, which it does do, back in April with that tariff announcement, I mean, I was walking people away from the cliff, all day long. It was just ugly.
Step away from the window.
Yeah. So my approach, and what I would tell other people to do, is you want to make sure you do have that first bucket, as you alluded to, cash on hand, because then when the market tanks and you panic, you don't want to sell in a panic in most cases, because then you're looking at huge losses. But by having that cash or that reserve or that first bucket, if you need money to live on, you can utilize that while you give those other investments time to appreciate and come back, because historically they always do. So again, that first bucket is, as you mentioned, is just huge, and it will keep you from selling in a panic. And because if you need the cash, you have it on hand.
Yeah, and the double whammy of that is if you sell a stock, and especially if you held it for a while, and you sell it, let's say it's a regular stock, it's not a Roth, well, you can't do Roths anyway. But the idea is if you sell it and you've made a lot of money on it, you also get a double whammy. You've lost the opportunity cost of the money being in the market when it recovers. And like you said, since the 30s, it's always recovered, right? You miss out the opportunities, and then you also get schwacked with some potential capital gains.
Yeah, very, very true. Less than a year would be, it's a higher capital gains rate. What drives me crazy is if I set somebody up in an investment and then the market blips and then they 3 months later want to bail. That's just not the right thing. Warren Buffett said, if you can't hold a stock for at least 5 years, you shouldn't hold for 5 minutes.
Right.
And I'm not saying that there aren't times when you need to sell, but
Right.
the point is with that cash cushion, you can ride out the turbulence. And that's the important point.
Have you done any research on this new big beautiful bill? As far as I've had questions come in about this. So we have some business owners, especially small business owners, that they're just getting going in trades. They're relying, some heavily, some not so heavily, but they're relying on the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare subsidies, right? And I found out from my CPA the other day that the weird thing about it was they gave it no runway for 2026. The subsidies are all changing. What they're changing to, they haven't released that information yet. They're still sorting out the bill, right? It's one of those things, we'll sign it and then read it later, I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. What I'm finding is a lot of these business owners are stuck in a tough situation because they're not making enough money. They don't have employees to go buy group insurance. And maybe this is out of your preview, I don't know, but I'm trying to figure out what direction to point these folks in, because it almost becomes punitive now if you're not working for an employer that pays for your health care, because it's just getting so stupid expensive. Are you hearing anything like that from your clients?
Yeah, and I think about it myself as well. It's a real conundrum. I don't know that I have a real good answer for you. Yeah, if you're not going to get the subsidy, then the ACA is difficult. Then you're stuck, paying whatever rate you can possibly get. I'm kind of dealing with that a little bit. My wife still works. So I'm an independent contractor. I'm self-employed, and so my wife still works, and I get her health insurance, but she wants to stop working. I'm not old enough for Medicare yet.
Yeah.
I make too much money to get any kind of subsidy. Not that I'm wealthy, but I just make too much money for that.
Right.
And so that's something I'm scratching my head over too. I'm going to be stuck with, if this transpires, having to pay at least $2,000 a month just for health insurance. And I'm frustrated. I don't have an answer for you. I guess I can just rant, but I don't know what to tell you, because I'm
facing just complain. I'm in the same boat you are, Rick. I'm an outside contractor. I work at Microsoft as a hired gun over there, and I don't work for Microsoft. I work for a subcontractor, and man, it's punitive. I did the calculation. I'm currently right now just part time, exactly same numbers. I'm looking at $1,800 to $2,000 a month, right? And I'm thinking, if this happens and they don't give us a reprieve, I'm going to be working just short of 2 weeks for the insurance company.
Yeah, I understand.
And frankly, I have a problem with that, my friend. I just do.
I get it. I've talked to insurance brokers. I've investigated it myself, and currently, we're just kind of stuck here.
Right.
Unless I just make my wife keep working longer, and she might be doing that a little longer than she wants to.
Yeah. Okay. So where are you based out of? You're on the West Coast too, right?
I'm in Spokane, Washington.
Okay. And how big of an area do you service, Rick?
Well, the Spokane, I don't know where are you exactly?
I'm in Hillsboro, Oregon, just down south of you. Yeah.
So you've probably been to Spokane and Coeur d'Alene.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So the Spokane, Coeur d'Alene area, but I'm licensed in, 15 different states.
Oh, wow.
So, I have clients in Florida, Pennsylvania, Alaska, kind of all over the place. And in this era, you can kind of work remotely. It's a little easier. So, depending on the individual or the circumstances, I work with people out of state, but most of my business is right here. Are
you taking new clients still?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll reach a point probably in a couple of years where I'll look at slowing down. But right now, with the cost of health insurance, I have to keep working. I have to keep growing.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Is there any parting investment advice? Obviously, not giving any recommendations, but is there any things you can recommend to people considering getting serious about it, in investing and building net worth? Is like any things that you'd like to recommend?
Well, again, I would just say for anybody who has not started, to just get going, just get started. And you may think you don't have enough money. You can open up an account, be it a Roth IRA or just an investment account, and do $50 a month into a mutual fund. And if you at least get something going, then you get the statements, then you see the numbers, and then it becomes more top of mind awareness. And then you got to kind of get some momentum. So the key thing is just get going. For most people, they can do that, even if it's a very minimal amount. And So it's easy to keep neglecting it, to keep putting it off, but wealth is built over time. I'm not ever recommending crypto. We're not going into anything to make $1 million overnight. It just doesn't work that way. It takes time.
What I hear people talking about Roths. What is a Roth for the common man? What's the key benefits of that? And is there any downsides to a Roth?
Yeah, great question. I think the Roth is huge because it's a retirement account where you fund it with after-tax dollars. You already paid the taxes. It goes into an account. It grows tax deferred, and then it comes out tax-free. So especially for younger people, if you can fund a Roth IRA, you can have a chunk of money at the end of the rainbow that's tax-free. So it's huge. Now, there are income limits. And so if you make too much money, you can't directly fund a Roth. You can then fund a traditional IRA. Now, traditional IRA is not bad. Whatever you contribute can be tax deductible, but later when you pull the money out, it's taxed as ordinary income, and you have to pay taxes then. But if you can get a Roth going and you qualify long term, for most people, tax-wise, it's very, very advantageous.
So rough numbers, and I know the laws change all the time, that they change things quite regularly. So if you're a skilled trade worker and you make under what dollar amount range to be able to qualify to get benefits from a Roth?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I'm probably going to be off here. But married filing jointly, I want to say it's adjusted gross income, about 216,000 or less.
Okay.
Would qualify you to fund a Roth, and that's adjusted gross income. So after all your deductions and so forth. Most people in the skilled trades probably would be in that income range to be able to fund a Roth IRA. Now, one thing to keep in mind, the government only allows you to put in up to $7,000 a year if you're under 50, $8,000 a year if you're 50 or older. That's the maximum.
Now, what if your employer, is that something you can get as an individual, or does it have to be also, can you get it both ways, either through your employer or personally?
Yeah, good question. If you have an employer-sponsored plan, it could be an employer-sponsored traditional 401k or a Roth 401k, and they match you. That's all cool. That's all good. You can do that. And you could also fund your own individual Roth or traditional.
So two separate accounts?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And the employer-sponsored has higher limits, but the individual, like I said, is either 7,000 or 8,000. And I have a lot of people that have an employer-sponsored plan, and they'll set up their own individual IRA as well.
That's amazing. Let's say it's around 200,000 a year. I mean, that's probably 98%. Well, maybe not 98, but at least 90% of all the people working in skilled trades could fit into that.
Yeah, most people. Yeah. And it's just it's kind of a no-brainer, if you will. If you qualify, you can free up at least $50 a month. Just get it going into a Roth IRA. Unless you need some kind of a tax break, then the traditional has its merits as well. But the Roth is
so you open up a Roth, and then inside that Roth can be the same types of funds that, in other words, doesn't matter. You get access to the same funds within that Roth. Okay.
A very good question. So the Roth IRA, if you will, is the umbrella. And it kind of shelters you from taxes. Right. Underneath that umbrella, you can invest in whatever you want.
Okay.
Stocks, ETFs, mutual funds. And I would say, frankly, for most people, mutual funds make the most sense, especially if you don't have a lot of money, because you have, incredible diversification in mutual funds. I'm not against individual stocks for the right person, but in most cases, mutual funds are going to give you the best bang for the buck, because if somebody listening doesn't know this, one mutual fund is invested in like 200 different stocks all in one fund. And so if one or two of those stocks do poorly, then you have another 190 to kind of lift the ship.
Right. So if everything's going great, you're making 10%, and then just happens to be that maybe this particular fund has a couple of semiconductor stocks would tend to go all over the place, and they take that sector takes a big bump. Instead of losing a lot off your 10%, your total portfolio may go down to 8 or 9%. But you're still making money.
Exactly. Tesla is a good example.
Right. I was just thinking of Tesla.
I think Tesla is a good company, and the stock has done really well. But then, of course, all the political residue and all that stuff just caused the stock to plummet. Now, we've seen recovery here. But again, the point being that if Tesla was one of the stocks in the mutual fund portfolio and it went down dramatically, you're still not going to be totally killed. And there's never been a mutual fund in all of American history that's gone broke.
Really?
You can Google that.
Did not know that.
There's
Wow.
been many stocks that have.
Oh, sure.
Now that
Like every day.
so mutual
Yeah.
funds, they're not entirely safe. You can lose money, but the likelihood of you just losing everything is not going to happen most likely.
Yeah, I've said for a long time, Rick, I don't have the brains or the patience to invest in individual issues. We're definitely in sync there because I tried it. I had a brokerage account years and years ago, and it made me crazy because I was always worried about. I was always checking, what am I doing here? I just want to fix air conditioning, refrigeration systems. I don't want to do this.
Well, again, I'll say this, not endorsing Dave Ramsey in any way, but he's a
Right.
good example. He's close to being a billionaire, and he invests in two things: paid for real estate and mutual funds.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
He doesn't have any individual stocks, any bonds, etc. And the only reason I bring that up is that he's a good example. You can accumulate tremendous wealth by keeping things simple.
He was totally broke.
Oh yeah,
Dave Ramsey was totally broke.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was yeah, I don't know when it happened to him. I remember seeing him a few times. Was real active with him as well. And I remember he was telling that story, and man, he lost his butt in real estate. Actually, I think it was real estate. He was flipping houses or something like that, and then the banks called all of his loans, and he was literally done.
Yeah, and again, it all goes back to debt.
Yeah,
Debt is the thing that will kill you. And if any of your listeners are thinking about wanting to flip houses to make money, I think that can happen. But his recommendations, mine as well, is first of all, you pay off your primary residence, no mortgage. Then you save enough money to buy a rental with cash only. Now, if you take those two steps first, that's going to slow you way down.
mm-hmm.
But if you do it that way, it makes it a lot safer approach.
Oh, after you cut up your credit cards.
Well, yeah, that too.
What did he call it? Plastectomy?
Plastectomy.
Is that what he called it? Yeah. He had those big old scissors.
Yeah. Yeah, that's there again. I'm not cultish, when it comes to him at all. I have a credit card, but I pay it off every month.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah. My dad, when I became of age it was harder back when I was growing up. Maybe you remember this, but getting a credit card was a big deal. Now they just give them out like candy. But I remember my dad had a conversation when I happened to say, Dad, I'm going to get I think it was Sears. I wanted to buy some tools or something like that. And I was going to get a Sears card. And my dad sat me down and said, look, this is convenient. This is great. But do not spend any money in a given month that you can't pay that card off every month. And that stuck with me. I've always been like that.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. That's good that you followed that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Cool. I think we're going to wrap things up here, Rick. So how do people get a hold of you? I'm going to put your contact information up, but you're taking new clients and you're open to helping skilled trade folks get their net worth, building their nest egg.
Yeah, I love to work with people in the skilled trades or anybody just getting started. That's kind of my wheelhouse. That's, like I said, kind of how I started. I started from nothing. Not that I'm ultra wealthy. I'm not, but I'm doing okay these days. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure what you'll project here, but my website probably is the best way to get a hold of me, because on the website would have my contact information, my my phone number, my email. There's a calendar on there. You can send a message.